My point is that no administration is left without corruption. Additionally, I want to ask the judge a question. Now, Mr. Clinton gave a pardon to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Rich. Mr. Rich was involved in an oil for food scandal, which I understand that money went to prop up the Saddam Hussein regime. Are you aware of any of the oil for food scandal incidents or Mr. Rich?
طبعا هذا الفساد موجود في كل العالم.
Corruption is found all over the world.
وسمعت أنا عن موضوع الفساد في النفط مقابل الغذاء.
And I have heard about corruption in the file of oil for food program. In the oil for food program.
والعراق يتعاون مع الدول الأخرى في سبيل جمع المعلومات عن هذا الفساد.
Iraq is cooperating with the other countries to gather information about this issue.
لكن باعتقادي الموضوع يختلف في العراق.
However, I believe that the issue is different in Iraq.
لأسباب عديدة.
For many reasons.
أولاً البنية التحتية في العراق تكاد تكون صفراً.
Firstly, the infrastructure in Iraq is almost equal to zero.
الخدمات بالبلد تكاد تكون صفراً.
Services in the country are almost equal to zero.
العراق بلد غني.
Iraq is a wealthy country.
تصور أن ميزانية 2007 هي 41 مليار دولار.
Imagine that the budget of 2007 is $41 billion.
و30 مليار المتبقية من السنوات الماضية.
And 30 billions are what remains from the previous and earlier years.
ألا تستحق مبلغ 71 مليار الذي يبني بلدا بكامله؟ ألا يستحق المتابعة من قبل الأجهزة الرقابية؟
Don't we think that $71 billion, such an amount that can build an entire country, don't we think that it deserves a follow-up and attention?
الفساد هو الفساد في كل وقت.
Corruption is corruption in all times.
وأنا مهني وأحارب الفساد لأنها مهنتي.
And I am a professional and I fight corruption because this is my profession to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Judge Radhi. And I just want to inform the gentleman, I don't want to make any comments, although I would like to make comments, but I won't make comments on his round of questioning. But when we were requested by the Justice Department not to inquire with Blackwater's recent episode in September, we honored that request. We have always honored requests from the Justice Department. Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for holding this hearing. I also want to thank Comptroller General Walker and also Inspector General Bowen for your great work on our behalf. And I also want to thank the judge. I appreciate the risk to yourself, and I offer the prayers of our country for the 31 employees of your ministry that have been killed and also their families. Judge Radhi, your testimony says that your investigators identified about $18 billion as the estimated cost of corruption in Iraq. There's so much to go on here. I've got to pick just one case so I can ask some questions about it. This is a case involving Aham al-Samari. Hope I have that right. And he was the head or very high in the electricity industry, the Ministry of Electricity, I guess it's called. I want to ask you, do you recall the facts surrounding Aham al-Samari?
أنه كان وزير الكهرباء وقد صرف لإعادة إعمار الكهرباء لا قد اعتمد مبلغ 4 مليارين دولار في وقتها لإعادة إعمار الكهرباء إلا أنه في وقت.
Just briefly, I'm trying to get the facts on. You don't need a long explanation. Just basically tell me what he was being investigated for. What were the allegations against Mr. al-Samarai?
التهم اجى من ديوان الرقابة المالية من السبريم اوديت اجانا 11 نقطة مخالفة للسيدة.
How about a leading question? How much money was Mr. al-Samarai accused of embezzling, stealing?
هو مو اختلاس وإنما هدر المال العام.
It is not embezzlement, it is a waste of public money.
Okay. Corruption involving how much money? Hundreds of millions?
نعم في كل وزارة مبلغ معين ومجموعة يكون 18 مليون دولار.
In each ministry, a certain amount of money, and the total across all ministries is $18 billion.
Okay. Now, I understand
for electricity, $2 billion.
$2 billion. Okay. Mr. al-Samarai, I understand, was arrested and held in prison inside the green zone, but he somehow escaped. Do you know the facts surrounding that?
أعرف أنه الوقائع المحيطة بهذا الحادث وأن شركة حماية أمريكية هي التي ساعدته في الهرب.
I know some of the facts that surround this case, and I know that a U.S. protection company has helped him get away.
Do you know what the name of that U.S. protection agency might have been?
I believe it's DynCorp.
Okay, Blackwater. Now, with the assistance of Blackwater, do you know where?
This is he said DynCorp.
Oh, DynCorp.
Right.
I'm sorry. DynCorp. Thank you. Thank you for that correction. Okay. So DynCorp, a U.S. contractor, helped this person get out of jail in the green zone. Do you know where Mr. al-Samarai is right now?
هذا لا يهمني. المهم أنه المحكمة قد أصدرت قرارا غيابيا ب3 سنوات على هروبه.
This is not important to me. What matters to me is there is a in absentia order or court order against this man, and that is a sentence for 3 years. It
may not be important to you, but it's important to this committee. Is it your understanding that this gentleman is in Chicago, in the United States right now?
المهم الآن حكم 3 سنوات على هروبه وهناك 11 قضية تنتظره وطلب الاسترداد بواسطة انتربول.
3 years sentence awaiting him, and there is 11 other charges against him fielded through the Interpol.
All right. My understanding, and I'll offer it for a testimony, that our staff did talk to this gentleman. He is in Chicago, and I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch. Let me explain that on the House floor we have votes, and we've got a number of votes. So we are going to recess now for around 40 minutes. I would request that members come back here as quickly as possible after the last vote so we can continue the questions. We thank you for your patience. We stand recessed. Meeting of the committee will please come back to order. Before Mr. Burton arrives, because he's next, Mr. Lynch, you were asking a question and you were in the middle of your question. Do you want to complete your last question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to, I'm going to ask Mr. Bowen, but I've tried to establish that the former Iraqi electricity minister was accused of corruption of potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. He was arrested. He was brought to the green zone. I believe it was a DOD facility. We're talking United States military. He was then broken out of that jail or removed from that jail by a U.S. contractor. We have evidence it was DynCorp. Testimony it was DynCorp. Mr. Bowen, is that your understanding of the facts of this case?
Yes, but with the one additional fact that he was convicted by that Iraqi court and was awaiting sentencing.
Okay. Is there an investigation ongoing relative to the handling of this case?
I can't comment on our ongoing investigations.
Okay, so if it's an ongoing investigation, it must be ongoing. Can you tell me, Mr. Bowen? And I've sort of followed your work in Iraq, and I appreciate it greatly. You're doing tremendous work, and I appreciate it. Can you tell me, is the allegation that this gentleman is in Chicago, is that correct? Is that your understanding?
That is what I have heard, yes.
Okay, I'll let it go at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Lynch. Mr. Burton, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right? Was there any corruption under Saddam Hussein?
شلون؟
كان هنالك فساد تحت ظل صدام حسين.
طبعا كان النفط له ولعائلته فقط.
Yes, sure. Oil was for Saddam's and for Saddam's family only.
Were you ever a prosecutor when Saddam Hussein was in power?
نعم.
Yes.
How long were you a prosecutor when Saddam Hussein was in power?
طبعا هو ما عيني ادعاء عام وانما اعتبرني موظف اعتيادي بعد تخرجي من المعهد القضائي.
After I graduated from the Judicial Institute, he did not consider me as member of the prosecution, but he dealt with me as a regular employee.
You were not a prosecutor from 79 to 92?
لم تكن مدعي عام من عام 79 إلى 92.
لا بعد القسم الأخير منها أصبح.
It shouldn't be that difficult to answer. Either you were or you weren't.
I graduated from the institute as a prosecutor.
So you were a prosecutor from 79 to 92.
إذا كنت في الادعاء العام من 79 إلى العام 1992.
لا الثلاث سنوات الأخيرة فقط.
Only the last 3 years.
What did you do before that from 79 to 92?
ما الذي فعلته قبل ذلك من 79 إلى 92؟
كنت أدير أموال القاصرين.
I was managing the funds of the juveniles or the orphans, those who are under 18 years old.
You were a prosecutor though for 3 years under Saddam Hussein.
كنت مدعي عام ل3 سنوات.
How did you get appointed? How did you get appointed to these positions? How did he get appointed to these positions?
هل تفهم معنى مصطلح prosecutor أو مدعي عام وهو يسألك كيف تم تعيينك كمدعي عام؟
There's a difference between an attorney.
هنالك فرق بين مدعي عام prosecutor وattorney أي محامي.
طبعا أنا اشتغلت محامي مدة طويلة إلى يوم التغيير.
I have worked as an attorney until the change.
But you were a prosecutor for the government.
ولكنك كنت في الادعاء العام تحت ظل الحكومة.
نعم في محكمة جنح misdemeanor.
In the court of misdemeanors, yes.
How did you get that job?
كيف حصلت على هذه الوظيفة؟
حسب تخرجت من المعهد القضائي ولأنه أنا مو بعدي معينوني بالأخير نتيجة حفاظي على أموال القاصرين اشتغلت كم سنة لكن ضغط كبير علي طلعت 92.
Yes, when I graduated from the Judicial Institute, they did not appoint me, but because I was a non-Ba'athist, but afterwards, because of my work managing the funds of the orphans, I was appointed to that. And then in '92, because of great pressure, I left.
Well, the record shows that you were in the Saddam Hussein regime from 1979 to 1992, and that you were a public prosecutor, and that you did work under Saddam Hussein. Now, it was laudable that you worked for the children that were damaged during the Iran-Iraq War, but you were, in fact, an official of Saddam Hussein, were you not?
What was your last question, Mr. Burton?
You were an official in the Saddam Hussein regime, and how did you get those jobs?
حصلت على هذه الوظائف بدراستي وبتعبي وجهدي الشخصي في الكلية والمعهد القضائي.
I obtained those jobs with my hard work, my studying, and my work at the Judicial Institute.
Well, let me just finish, Mr. Chairman, and I know you've given others just a little bit extra time. Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator who even cut people up and put them in chippers. They did everything, buried hundreds of thousands of people in mass graves. And if you had been an opponent of Saddam Hussein, I cannot figure out how you got those jobs.
Of course, under Saddam Hussein, I refused to do what he was asking, and therefore they put me in prison and they broke my head, the bones of my head.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burton.
Mr. Chairman, point of inquiry. Under our rules, I believe, from my past experience, that those who are advising, specifically providing testimonial input, are also supposed to be identified and sworn. Could we at least have the identification of those who are obviously contributing considerably to the answer?
Well, we did have the translator identified.
No, the gentleman behind.
Oh, the attorney?
Yes, and the one next to it. They're obviously providing a significant amount of these answers.
I don't recall that that's the practice of the committee to ever ask who's advising people. They're not testifying. Ms. Watson?
Mr. Chairman, parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Just a minute, Ms. Watson. Yes, you have a parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It is a fact, is it not, that when we were doing investigations under my leadership, that we did identify the people behind those who were testifying?
I understand that that was not the general practice. I know of no rule that requires it. If you want to find out, I don't have any reason why you shouldn't find out, but that hasn't been the way this committee's operated in the past.
You have selective memory loss like the White House did.
Resuming my time.
No, you haven't started your time, but you will now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Judge Radhi, were you tortured under Saddam Hussein?
تعرضت مرتين سنة 70 وسنة 77.
Yes, I was tortured twice in 1970 and in 1977.
Yes. Do you still bear the marks of that torture on your body?
كسر في الجمجمة واضح، كسر في الجمجمة واضح.
A break in my head skull is still visible.
Right. Thank you so very much. Judge Radhi, in your written testimony, you say that Prime Minister Maliki has refused to recognize the independence of the Public Integrity Commission. You also said that officials and agencies in the Iraqi government sent us formal letters forbidding us, and this is a quote, to take any action against the presidency, council of ministers, and former or current ministers. Is that right?
وهذا هو الكتاب أمامكم اللي منعونا من التحقيق بقضايا رئاسة الوزراء ورئاسة الجمهورية.
This is right, and this is a letter that would demonstrate to you in front of you that they prohibited us from conducting investigation touching the presidency, the council of ministers, current and former ministers.
Yes, that letter is up on the screen. The press might want to get a copy of it. And the document says that, and I'll read it because the wording is so small. It's been decided not to refer any of the following parties to the court until approval of His Excellency the Prime Minister is obtained, presidential office, council of ministers, current and previous ministers. This is a secret order from Prime Minister Maliki's office saying that you cannot investigate the Iraqi president, the prime minister, or any current or past Iraqi ministers without the prime minister's position. Is that right? And we have a copy of it here. Both in your language and you're nodding that that's correct. Yeah. Is this order allowed under the Iraqi constitution?
مستقلة إلا من رقابة مجلس النواب.
This is an illegal order, and the Iraqi that goes against the constitution, and the constitution considers the CPI an independent entity, and that would only be subject to orders of the parliament.
Thank you. Judge, did you have any cases that you were investigating that were stopped by this order?
Tens of cases were stopped because of this letter would go to the courts, and the courts would stop looking into examining the cases.
And did you have cases that involved current and past ministers?
Yes, current and former ministers.
I would say that this letter, this secret letter, illustrates and demonstrates to me that there are violations of your own constitution going on under this administration.
That's true.
And to me, I interpret it as corruption.
Yes.
If this is a new developing democracy, we need to attack corruption wherever we find it, and that's the reason for this hearing today. I appreciate your response, and maybe you want to translate that. I appreciate one of your responses to one of our members when you said corruption is corruption, and I am a professional, and I go after corruption wherever it may be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony today. I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ms. Watson. We now turn to Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing, and I appreciate the bravery, particularly of Judge Radhi. As members of Congress know, and hopefully the public knows, General Jones, the Marine Corps General, issued a bipartisan report just last month. It was called the Report of the Independent Commission on the Security Forces of Iraq. And of course, there are two missions we've been training the Iraqi folks for: military and police. I trust all the witnesses are familiar with this report because it says, quote, "Sectarianism and corruption are pervasive in the Ministry of Interior and cripple the ministry's ability to accomplish its mission to provide internal security of Iraqi citizens." End of quote. Things are apparently so bad at the Interior Ministry that this report by General Jones, the Marine Corps General, recommends that the entire national police be disbanded. Here's exactly what the report concluded. Quote, "Conclusion, the national police have proven operationally ineffective. Sectarianism in its units undermine its ability to provide security. The force is not viable in its current form. The national police should be disbanded and reorganized." That's a pretty damning conclusion. Mr. Bowen, as the Inspector General, what is your opinion? Have corruption and sectarianism really gotten to this point that the Jones recommendation is appropriate to scrap the national police and start all over?
I am very familiar with that issue and that report, and indeed I met with members of the Multinational Security Transition Command Iraq that is in charge of training the national police, and they independently confirmed to me the problem of infiltration in the national police, as well as other problems in the IPS and other Iraqi security forces, and the facility protection services as well. But the national police is a very serious issue. It's managed quite directly from the MOI, and the corruption that grew within it, which is really a sectarian infiltration that was condoned over several years, has produced the situation that General Jones quite accurately addressed, and his solution, I think, is on point.
Judge Radhi knows this situation better than any of us do. One of the most disturbing elements of this conclusion of the report was that the previous Minister of the Interior was a man, and forgive me if I mispronounce it, Bayan Jabir?
Bayan Jabir.
Bayan Jabir. And it was under his leadership that the ministry became so heavily politicized. The report, for example, says that Mr. Jabir gave key ministry posts to members of the Badr Brigade, and the Badr Brigade militia infiltrated Iraqi police units throughout Iraq. Judge Radhi, to your knowledge, was Mr. Jabir a member of the Badr organization?
أنا طبعا هذا الموضوع أعرفه فقط من الإعلام، لأنني لم يعني ما عندي علاقة سياسية وياهم.
This issue, of course, I know about it from the media because I do not have a political relationship with them.
أحب أن أقول أنه هذه الوزارات الأمنية هي الآن مقسمة عطائفية، لذلك تشوف أدائها غير جيد.
However, I can say that these security ministries are now divided among the sectarianism and the sectarianism influence, and therefore you see that their performance is not a good performance.
Well, the amazing thing to me is it's my understanding, even though Mr. Jabir was the previous Minister of Interior, instead of being punished or reformed or in any way changed, now it's my understanding he's been promoted to be Minister of Finance, which is truly astonishing. Judge Radhi, given Mr. Jabbar's record at the Interior Ministry, do you have any concerns about what he is doing as Minister of Finance?
أنا قلقي من الوزارات نفسها هي مستمرة في المحاصصة الطائفية ولذلك هي ما تحمي شعب العراق.
My concern is towards the ministries themselves, because the sectarian quotas are ongoing, and therefore these ministries are not protecting the Iraqi people. And therefore you see that the security is continuously deteriorating.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you.
Have you completed what you wanted to say? Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Salmi?